Morning, friends and teachers. Today, our group will present you about the Renaissance during the 7th century, and we will discuss about the literature. I am Gabriella Daisy, student number 194, 214, and 145.
Good morning, guys. My name is Titus B Togatorop, and I'll be the one presenting the first part of our presentation. First, we'll be looking at the historical background of the 17th century and how it influenced the literary works throughout the period. The 17th century period was filled with a lot of unceasing conflicts in Britain. It marked a shift from age of faith to an age of reason. Literary work here represents the turbulence in society, religion, and the monarchy of this period. During this period, life for English people changed as religious controversy and civil war shook the nation. This issue formulated the new roles of individuals in society, perspective of faith, and social structures within England. Next, we'll be looking at the civil unrest in England. One of the main factors of civil unrest in England is that people were imprisoned for practicing faiths beyond that sanctioned by the government. The government had a hard time of combining church and the state, which created hostility within people. The Protestant Church of England itself was perceived by the people of England as becoming increasingly similar to the Catholic Church, creates a religious sects such as Puritans and separationists, which furthermore weakening the ties between the monarch and the common people. Next, we'll be looking at the King Charles I and the Parliament. After the Queen Elizabeth's death, James VI of Scotland became King James I of England in 1603. He tried to rule without the Parliament as much as possible, as King James I believed that he is the divine right. He has the divine right of kings, that his king was chosen by God, and only God could judge him. He expressed his opinion openly, and that led to trouble with the Parliament. In 1618, the 30-Year War began. The Parliament wishes to go to war against the Catholic, but King James I did not agree. Until his death in 1625, he was always quarreling with the Parliament over money and over its desire to play a part in his foreign policy. His son later, Charles I, quarreled with the House of Commons even more than his father, and it was also over money. Finally, Charles I dissolved the Parliament, and after that he had to recall the Parliament because he needed money. But each time he did so, he quarreled with the Parliament even more. Charles revived old laws and taxes without the agreement of Parliament. When Parliament complained in 1625, he dismissed them. Until 1640, Charles ruled without a Parliament. This period is often referred to as 11 years tyranny. After Charles had tried and failed to arrest 5 leaders of the Parliament, a civil war broke out. Parliament had the support of the southeast of England, merchants, and London, and the navy. Charles' forces were gradually worn down after Oliver Cromwell set up a new model army, and Parliament won decisive victory at Marston Moor and Naseby. Charles surrendered in 1646, and he failed a second time to defeat the Parliament during the Second Civil War in 1648. Finally, the Parliament put him on trial for treason, and he was later executed in 1649. Next, we'll be looking at the next major event, the English Revolution. The Glorious Revolution was a bloodless coup that took place from 1688 to 1689, in which Catholic King James II of England was deposed and succeeded by his Protestant daughter Mary II and her Dutch husband Prince William III of Orange. Many historians believe that the Glorious Revolution was one of the most important events leading to Britain's transformation from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy. After this event, the monarchy in England would never hold absolute power again. With the Bill of Rights, the regent's power was divine, written down and limited for the first time. The Parliament's function and influence changed dramatically in years following the Revolution. The event also had an impact on the 13 colonies in North America. The colonies were temporarily freed fled from strict and anti-Puritan laws after King James was overthrown. Next, we'll be looking at the 17th century literature. One of the characteristics of the 17th century literature is that it emphasizes on challenging and old ideas. Therefore, in every matter, a person should apply his own reason, common sense. This was the result of the political and religious struggles that happened beforehand. Next, we'll be looking at the 17th century poems. There are two major.
Next, we'll be discussing the 17th century poem. There are two major styles in 17th century poems. They are cavaliers and then metaphysical. The cavalier poets were generally in support of the royal family. They are members of aristocracy and support the King Charles I. Their poems are short and easygoing, are mainly about physical pleasure of this world. Many of the poems center around sensual, romantic love, and also the idea of the carpe diem, which means seize the day. They live for the moment. To the cavalier poet, enjoying life was more important than following moral codes. Next is metaphysical poetry. Metaphysical poetry is a group of poems that share common characteristics. They are highly intellectualized, marked by unconventional imaginary that drew metaphor from philosophy, theology, and science rather than nature, emphasizing on analyzing emotion and not expressing it. It also dealt with darker subjects, thus demanded more from the reader. One of the main characteristics of metaphysical poem is the use of conceit. A metaphysical conceit is a complex literary device that makes a far-stretched comparison between a spiritual aspect of a person and a physical thing in the world. Quite simply, a metaphysical conceit is an extended metaphor which can sometimes last through the entire poem. A metaphysical conceit works to connect the reader's sensory perception to abstract ideas. Next, we'll be looking at an English poet who is regarded as the founder of metaphysical poetry. John Donne was born in 1572 and died in 1631 in London. He is the leading English poet of the metaphysical school and the dean of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Donne is often considered the greatest love poet in English language. Next, we'll be analyzing a poem titled The Anniversary by John Donne. This poem celebrates the first anniversary of Donne's marriage with his wife Anne More. It is addressed to his wife, and it is a noble and impassioned hymn of his love. Donne regards a married love as immortal as it will. According to him, it even persists even in the grave. For him, all other things decay, but their mutual love remains eternal. We'll be looking at the first stanza, which argue the constancy of their love rather than a love that grows over time. While their love does not decay, it also does not increase. He is satisfied with it. There is no tomorrow or yesterday, and the first and last day are kept all the same. The second stanza, however, John acknowledged that while their love is timeless, their physical body are not so fortunate. This is the concept of concession. One of them will die, and this will force them to live at last in death in these eyes and ears. The final stanza points out at this point that the lover will be like all the rest. They will be blessed in the afterlife, but they will no longer have a unique and ageless relationship. Yet, while they remain on earth, they are in a special realm of constant love which available to them. Next is John Milton, which will be presented by our friend Daisy.
Thank you, Kak Titus. Now, today I will explain about John Milton during the 17th century. So, he was born at 1608 until 1674. Who is John Milton? John Milton was the greatest writer of the Puritan movement. What is a Puritan? A Puritan is a member of group of English Protestants of the late 16th and 17th centuries who regarded the reformation of the church of England under the Elizabeth as an incomplete and so to simplify and regulate form of worship. He was smart as he was able to understand and study philosophy, politics, and even knew Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and Italian. He read widely both in the ancient classics and in the literature of his own time. So his renowned literature are Paradise Lost and On His Blindness, which I will discuss about both magical literature that he made today. So he was also famous because he was the most significant English writer after William Shakespeare. Now we will discuss about On His Blindness. Before that, let's listen to the sonnet which Milton made on Sonnet 19 on his blindness.
On His Blindness by John Milton. When I consider how my light is spent, ere half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent which is death to hide, lodged with me useless, though my soul more bent, to serve there with my Maker, and present my true accounts, lest he returning chide. Doth God exact day labor, light denied? I fondly ask. But patience, to prevent that murmur, soon replies, God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly, thousands at his beating speed, and post o'er land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait.
So on John Milton on his blindness sonnet, as John Milton, who is an English poet, who is by 1655 at age 40 was blind, and his ability to write was threatened, and as a result, his relationship with God became complicated. And on his blindness, Milton is struggling to understand what God expects of him. Now that he is losing his sight, he's upset about wasting that one talent which is dead to hide line 3, which is a biblical reference to the parable of the talents, Matthew 25:14-30, in which two people invest their talents in the story. Talents are money, while another just hides his talents in a hole and is punished. Milton feels that God expects him to use his talent for writing poetry in a way that honors him. Milton is frustrated that his lack of sight is preventing him from serving God when he wants to so badly the soul more bend. To serve there with my Maker and present my true account. His line 4-6, Milton's true account refers to his religious poetry. Much of his poetry was concerned with God's relationship to mankind, and he considered it serious duty to write poetry. The stimulously made God's mysterious ways more clear to people and honored God with its craft at line 7. Milton wonders if God still expects him to write without his sight. Then he decides that God is more forgiving than he was giving with him credit for, surely knowing of his condition and strong desire to please him. God wouldn't expect anything that he couldn't possibly accomplish, nor would he punish him. That last half of the poem has a calmer tone. It's almost like Milton realizes that while he was writing, that people can serve God in many different ways. It's the intent and the grace with which one deals with hardship that count who best bear his mild yoke, that they serve him best within 14. Line 14 lines. Milton has depicted a wavering, then regaining of faith, while the poem discusses Milton's blindness. His condition is used to explore his faith. Like Milton's other religious poetry, the purpose is to decide what a person's relationship with God and his or her role on earth should look like. At first, he was afraid. He would be punished for wasting his talent and seemed almost distrusting of God, who presumably might have the power to cause or prevent his blindness. Still expecting him to write he decided that bearing his blindness gracefully and doing the best he could would satisfy him. This poem is a traditional sonnet containing 14 lines and using the Italian sonnet rhyme scheme A B B A C D E C D E. In sonnet, there's usually a turn or a change of attitude during the latter half of the poem. As we've discussed, Milton's fate takes a journey in this short poem, and his change of perspective is signaled by the line, "But patient to prevent that murmur soon replies." The but indicates that his initial dread of punishment might be misguided. In terms of figurative language, Milton uses light as a metaphor for vision. He reflects on how his light is spent and asks God would exact day labor light denied. He would make an allusion or a reference to another work. When facts about wasting his talent, the biblical parable John Milton wrote on his blindness to express his frustration and wavering faith. That his blindness brought on at first, he doesn't understand why God would make him blind if writing his great talent requires sight, or what he is expected to do about it. By the end of the poem, he has decided that his God is patient and forgiving. He just needs to keep trying his best and to bear his disability gracefully. The poem is in a traditional sonnet form and employs figurative language to illustrate Milton's idea. Now, I will discuss the next literature that John Milton made. It is Paradise Lost. Since this book is a long story to tell, and we don't have enough time for that, we'll just tell the summary and the whole story inside the book of Paradise Lost. So, Paradise Lost by John Milton. In the introduction of Paradise Lost, conforms to epic tradition, with John Milton stating his theme of the fall and invoking a heavenly muse to inspire his effort to justify the ways of God to man. He begins his story in medias res as the rising action of the poem begins when God has cast Satan and his rebel army of fallen angels out of heaven, and they are floating on a fiery lake like in hell. Led by Satan, these fallen angels form a council to debate how to continue their resistance to God. Through his second in command, Satan convinces them that the best target is man, which is God's newest creation. Satan volunteers to fly to the world full of God's new creatures. His children, sin and death, help him exit through the gates of hell. When Satan promises to return territory usurped by God chaos and not direct him to the new world, God already knows that Satan will succeed in tempting and corrupting mankind. He announces that man will be punished for his disobedience because he created humans to be strong enough to withstand such temptation. He claims with his new creation will be punished by death unless someone is in heaven is willing to die on their behalf. God's only son, Jesus, volunteers. Satan lands in the new world and sneaks into the Garden of Eden, disguised as a cherub. Once inside the garden, he watches Adam and Eve, and he is envious of the beauty and happiness that indicates God's favor. Though he has a moment of doubt, Satan stays resolved to his plan to corrupt them. He overhears Adam and Eve discussing about the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge, and Satan decided to seduce them with his fruit. Uriel, an angel guarding paradise, realizes that the cherub is really Satan in disguise, and he sends angel to find the intruder. They find Satan at Eve's ear, whispering into her dreams, and they return Satan to Gabriel. Satan prepares for battle, but God then sends a warning, a pair of golden scales in the sky to demonstrate the futility of Satan's resistance. Recognizing that God has the ultimate power and advantage, Satan flees away. God decides that although he cannot control their action, he must warn Adam and Eve about Satan. So he sends Archangel Raphael to Adam to remind him of his free will and to warn him about Satan's plotting. Raphael also tells Adam the story of Satan's rebellion in heaven, the ultimate defeat of his army, and the expulsion into hell. After Raphael finishes telling Adam the story, Satan returns to the Garden of Eden, taking on the form of serpent. In the climax of the poem, Satan finds Eve alone and tempts her with knowledge and status. If she eats the fruit of tree of knowledge, after hesitating, she eats the fruit and then offers it to Adam. Though he realizes that they're doomed, Adam eats the fruit, so they will share the same fate in the falling action. God is angry and sends the Son to go to the Garden of Eden. To deliver his judgment, Eve and all women will experience pain in childbirth, and they must submit to their husband will, Adam's. And all men will labor to grow food from cursed ground. Satan was very delighted by his success, and his children, sin and death, built a bridge between hell and earth. And then Satan returns driven to hell, but then Sun transforms him and all his followers into serpents, doomed to eternally hunger for fruit that turns to ashes when they bite into it. God next orders angels to change the new world to reflect Adam and Eve fall. And they alter the weather and create discord between humans and animals. Adam and Eve argue and blame each other for their condition, but ultimately they confess to God, ask pardon, and repent. God is merciful, promising to reward their obedience with an afterlife in heaven. God sends Archangel Michael to show Adam's vision of their future. Cain will murder Abel. Giants will rule and know gods, and God's flood will wipe out all but Noah's family and their animals. The visions of Noah's survival offers Adam hope, in addition to depicting the suffering that humans will endure to resolution Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve finally leave paradise and accepting their fate. Thank you for listening to our presentation. I hope you enjoy our presentation. See you next time. If anyone have questions, please write down below or mention after class. See you.